Thank you.
So I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you're safe and good spirits. We thank you so much for being here today. So my name is Stephanie Maricu. I serve as Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at Providence College, our beloved. I just started actually on March 9th, so I'm really happy to be a part of the Friar family, and I've been feeling really welcome and supported, so I'm happy to be here in community with you all today. As an avid reader, writer, and language enthusiast, I'm pleased to be part of this conversation today. As you likely know, this conversation is part of the For the Love of Learning, theme of the Friar Ties weekly programming series. And we're pleased to welcome Matt Weber from the class of 2006 for our gathering today, as we're going to discuss the role of reading in this time of uncertainty. So before we get started, I just want to share a few details about Matt. So Matt is a highly acclaimed, Emmy-winning digital content creator and expert, author, and higher education practitioner. His professional experience ranges from media consulting and television production to lecturing and senior leadership advisement. He currently serves as the Senior Assistant to the President at the University of Virginia. Prior to that, he worked for nearly a decade at the Harvard University Graduate School of Education in varying roles, including the areas of digital content strategy, news and social media, and teaching. He's an enthusiastic member of the Friar family, as a proud member of the class of 2006, and was an American Studies major at PC. His mother, Margaret, is from class of 76, and his sisters, Carrie and Elizabeth, are from classes 2004 and 2010, respectively. They're also alums. Weber also earned a master's degree in higher education administration from Boston College in 2008, and a Master of Education degree in technology, innovation, and education from Harvard in 2011. We're really excited to have you here, Matt, and we're so grateful for you joining us today.
Hey, thanks.
Discuss this literary time of engagement and have this social, and we look forward to the time we're going to have together. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the digital microphone to Matt.
Thank you, and thanks, Steph, and welcome to your time at Providence College. I hope it's long and as wonderful for you as it has been for a lot of us on this call. I'm going to switch my digital backdrop here to, well, I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep it like that, but that might be familiar to Mr. Brown down there. I'm going to probably take that off. I thought that would look a lot better. That's Fennell Hall. That's where I spent all 4 of my years at Providence College, and it's really great to be back and to see people who I lived with at Fennell Hall. There he is, and to see all sorts of faces that I've gotten to know from my time at PC over the years. So wonderful to see Pat, who actually was on my floor at one point. I think, Pat, you were actually my RA. Is that correct? And it looks like he's got a wonderful family there and a beautiful big kitchen. And Jackie and Bob and Kristen and the Marr family and everyone else. Just, it's really great to connect with you all in this way. And again, you know, we're talking about books, and hopefully we all have time to read. All of the elements that would maybe be more distractions of leaving the house are now gone. So it's a lot more time at home to figure out what you want to read. So I'm a writer and I'm a reader, and I thought, like, today we could just talk about some of the books that we've enjoyed, share some of those recommendations, and then maybe even talk about some of the books that we would recommend not reading. I think that's also as important as recommend what we do read. And I'll facilitate and kick things off, but I want to hear as much as I can from all of you, and not just have it be me talking about books and reading and you guys listening. I want to hear what you all have to say. And for those who I don't know on the call, please, introduce yourselves, your Providence affiliation, and what books you're reading. So I'll start off. I brought a handful here. So this is a pretty thick book. One of the bigger books that I've ever actually read. I think it's 724 pages, but the book really ends at page 500, and the rest are just footnotes. That's how well resourced it is. It's about the history of the Vatican Bank, which I thought was a good book to bring up on a Providence College literary thing. Oh, by the way, also a good thing to do on a Providence College literary happy hour is drink from my Providence College wine glass. So I don't know, again, I see someone, Pat, in your screen who's maybe under the age of 21. So to everyone else, cheers and go Friars. In moderation, of course. God's Bankers, fascinating book, the history of the Vatican Bank. And it really goes back into the history of Italy and the history of the Vatican and the popes and the roles. And it really sheds a lot of light into what Pope Francis and Pope Benedict have always kind of had to deal with, knowing that the Vatican Bank is very complicated. It's storied. It has a lot of corrupt, shady elements. There's a lot of really unique elements to what the Vatican Bank could do compared to other banks, and how it was used in many ways as a great charitable organization, and also as a place where a lot of money was laundered. So just really fascinating book, worth the read. Gerald Posner, he is writing about it he's a New York Times bestseller, but he's very journalistic in his writing. It's very fair, I think, to the Catholic Church. It's not a negative approach to it. And it's totally fascinating. It's history, it's drama, it's intrigue, it's mafia, and it's religion, all kind of packed up into one thing. It's sort of a great book. And then the other book I'm going to bring up here is, so no one's flying right now, but prior to this pandemic, I was flying a lot with my new job and going into various cities. And the sad part is I have an absolute fear of flying. I hate it. It stresses me out so much. And I just kept thinking, like, the only way to get over some of your own fears is, instead of avoiding them, you just kind of get closer and closer and learn more and more about it. So I heard about this book called Cockpit Confidential, written by Patrick Smith. He's a pilot, and it's a really light read. It's something you could read, in a sitting or two. And it's just a series of questions that he's been asked over the course of his career, from what is turbulence to what is the most beautiful airport or the hardest airport to land in, to all the things that I would have fears about, with the bells and the dinging and cockpit doors and all of that stuff. So it's a really interesting read. It's one of those things where you can kind of pick it up. It's very interstitial. It doesn't have an arc. You could open it up right now and it says, what are the annoying rules pertaining to window shades, seat backs, tray tables, and cabin lights? Why is that important during takeoff and landing? And then it's 2 paragraphs that answers that. So I found that this book has been helpful in getting over my own fear of flying. And this book has been helpful in getting a nice dose of Catholicism and intrigue without ever really having to leave my house. So I think that's enough for me for now. I'd love to just kind of go around this Guess Who board and figure out what you guys are reading. Maybe, if it's okay, start with someone who I don't think I know, unless I'm wrong. Mary Sullivan, is it Haller? Have we met before? And welcome, and what are you reading? I think you're on mute. There you go.
There we go. We're all learning so much so quickly.
Yes.
Well, I didn't get here on time. Too busy pouring my glass of wine. Class of '89.
Nice.
And Matt, I'm in Virginia too, teaching high school English in Fairfax County.
Nice.
So I was an English major, and I've joined 2 book clubs in my midlife years, which is such a welcome structure, I suppose, because I was such a fiction person for so long, and now I've been exposed to a lot more nonfiction. And so currently I'm reading Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, I think is how you pronounce it. And mostly that was prompted by, well, the book club, yes, and the fact that my parents are in their 80s and we're facing a lot of those questions about hospitalization and the way that in this country we treat dying and the kind of medicalization of old age. So it's been giving me a lot to think about in terms of decisions that my brothers and I will be making. So that's where I am currently, and lots of rereads now that we're on vacation.
Right.
Or vacation. Well, I'm on Easter break from my Catholic high school where I teach, so it does feel like a vacation this week.
Yeah, wow, that's great. I think Being Mortal was turned into a 1-hour documentary on PBS. And
Oh, yeah?
Gawande is one of the rare breeds of, he's a practicing surgeon in Massachusetts and also a really fantastic writer. It's rare to have that combination. So did you finish the book yet, or are you midway through it?
I did. I finished it.
Yeah.
I finished it. I meant it. I kind of wished I'd taken notes, but I was a little bit, I don't know, indifferent to that extra step. Sometimes I do that, but other times I just read on through.
Okay, I think we could institute a rating policy too of, if you've finished the book, I'll create a new scale with each individual. So I'm guessing you know McVinney Hall, 10 floors?
I do.
Okay, so on a scale of floor 1 to floor 10 of McVinney, how many McVinney floors would you give the book?
I'd give it a 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
the
I
floor.
lived-
That's
I
the
lived-
floor I lived on.
Yeah.
7. Ding, 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 ding.
Who's that? Marie?
Sarah.
Who said that, Marie? Oh,
Oh,
Sarah.
Sarah.
I was in room 610.
I was
I
505.
was 710.
Love it.
Loved McVinney.
Okay, I probably should have picked McVinney as my backdrop today.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's cool. And maybe I'll see you around Virginia, Mary. Nice to meet you. If you're ever in Charlottesville, shoot me an email, okay?
Will do.
Seriously. Okay, can I go in on my screen? If you go up, I see Gail. Gail? I think still on mute. There you
Yeah, it just wasn't working. Hey, Matt. I am not a PC grad, but I am on Bob's team. I work with Sarah and Stephanie and Marie. We met a few years ago when you came for the authors panel
Oh, yeah. Okay.
on campus. And I also have a Virginia connection. My daughter went to college there. And now she's in her master's program at UVA, but online. So,
Oh, good for her. Oh, cool. What a
Yeah.
connection. And what book are you reading these days?
I like biographies. I like historical stories. In fact, we had a conversation with our team earlier. I like a lot of James Michener, but I'm reading the Jennifer Worth series that called The Midwife is based on PBS. So there's 3 books there, and I am in the middle of the second one right now. So it takes place in the 50s and 60s in the dock areas of London.
Wow.
And, it's really interesting.
Huh. And have you watched the show? Is the show comparable to the book?
The show has already moved way past the time frame of the book because the author had left the convent. Actually, they lived in a convent of Anglican nuns, but the books are on a very specific time frame, and both are really good.
Cool. Okay, cool. Okay, nice to see you again, Gail. Let's move over to, let's go to P. Owen Brown, who, by the way, when I knew the guy, he was just Pat, but maybe he's P. Owen, which is, again, as you grow older, you have to sophisticate your name. So if it's P. Owen, go ahead, P. Owen and child.
So it's still Patrick. This is just one of a few email addresses that I use. So for Zoom purposes. So it's one of my aliases. But if just as a bit of a public service announcement, if you hear any young children's voices in the background, we have a full house. We just had baby number 5, and he's asleep. He's asleep in the swing. So it's an active place, and we actually live on a 10-acre hobby farm just south of Ottawa, the other nation's capital here in Canada. And we have a couple of cows and a flock of chickens. So we got a lot of mouths to feed.
Wow. Wait, what type of farm are you on?
A hobby farm. So it's not a big operation. It's only 10 acres. It's just for fun, but even just for fun, it's still a lot of work.
Okay, I was trying to figure out if I didn't recognize what vegetable a hobby was.
Only in Canada, native to the north.
So Pat, I imagine you're reading children's books, but what else?
Yeah, in my spare time, actually one book that I read, you want to get in here? What? One book that I read with my daughter Perpetua here was called Characters of the English Reformation.
No, the Reformation.
It's by Hilaire Belloc, who was a contemporary of G.K. Chesterton and actually a friend of G.K. Chesterton. They used to gather in the pub and quarrel and debate and make merry. So it's a pretty interesting take. Belloc was a devout Catholic, so naturally he's got some interesting perspectives on the English Reformation and the drivers and the effects. So he advances a lot of interesting theories, and his portraits of the different main figures in the Reformation are quite insightful. He's a very elegant writer. And you learn a lot about the Reformation and the personalities behind it in a very short setting. So that was quite interesting. And my daughter here actually dressed up as Mary Tudor, the first Queen of England, for her homeschool class. So it was a bit of a joint journey. And then this past Lent, I read my first installment by the Catholic author Louis de Waal. You may be familiar with him. I'm kind of late coming to his work. But this is a book about St. Francis Xavier, his conversion, courtesy of Ignatius of Loyola, and his travels all around the world as a missionary. A fascinating insight into one of the preeminent saints in our church, and just the zeal he had for spreading the faith, and the amazing courage he showed in his journeys. And the last book I was going to plug, I didn't write it, but my brother did. My family is half American, half Canadian. My older brother is a major in the U.S. Marine Corps, and he did some original research on an Air Force colonel who developed a doctrine known as maneuver warfare, which has become the standard warfighting doctrine for the U.S. Marine Corps. And it was interesting. He contributed a lot to the historical record. He actually retrieved a lot of audio from the archives that had never been heard before, and transcribed a lot of lectures from the colonel named John Boyd, and made an excellent contribution to the study of this individual and his theories, which have had such a profound impact on warfighting doctrine in the U.S. military.
Wow. Congratulations on your brother's book. That's amazing. And it sounds like between raising 5 kids and reading to them, the fact that you have time to read about those other things and to have Lent books, I commend you on your time management, Pat.
It's taken a while to get here, but some of it's baptism by fire and trial by error.
Yeah.
But before I forget, I just wanted to thank you, Matt, for organizing this. This is a great event.
It's not me. It's all Sarah and Stephanie. They put it together, so they get all the credit. And it's good to see you, Pat. It's been a while. Do you make it down to Providence much?
No, I'm order. In my past job, I traveled to Washington, D.C. a fair bit. But the last couple of years, it's pretty much been, just planting the roots here in Ontario.
Planting the roots of hobby.
Yes.
Very cool. Well, good seeing you, Pat. We'll switch over to, looks like it's Rachel to my right. Rachel Siriani.
Hello.
Nice to see you. What are you up to reading these days?
Hi, I'm Rachel, class of 05. I lived in Mar. So I live in the Boston area. I actually live in Boston proper. And I just finished the book, The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd. I'm sort of, I think, behind on the trendy books because I think this came out actually earlier this decade. But it's about this woman, Sarah Grimke, who was born to a wealthy family in Charleston in the early 1800s. And she's given a slave when she turns 12. And the story basically follows her and her slave in parallel. And by the end of the book, she's a famous abolitionist. She's given up all her wealth, and she's really made a name for herself in the abolitionist movement. So I read this whole book thinking it was just a story, and got to the end and realized I admittedly don't know a lot about history, realized that Sarah Grimke was a real person. Her and her sister truly were pretty famous abolitionists at the time. And then I started Googling it, and I found out she's buried like 2.5 miles from my house. So I don't know if anyone here lives in the Boston area, but since we're on quarantine, one thing you can do is go on walks. So I decided I'd walk and find her grave. And it took me several days to actually locate it. But suffice it to say, or she's buried, it's in the Forest Hills area of Boston, in this like pretty unmarked area of the cemetery, in this sort of forgotten grave. And I found it really fascinating to find it and to see it after reading the story of her life. So it was the invention of wings if you live in the Boston area.
Wow. And then you can provide people the map to get to the graveyard if they want to get there. Good for you. That's kind of always neat when you're reading a book and it takes on new life as it relates to where you live, and the fact that you realize it's not fiction, it's real, and it's right in your backyard. How cool. How are things in Boston right now? I know that's a hot spot right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the medical field. I'm not an essential employer, so I'm not really out there too much. So from inside my house, it's pretty calm.
You're hanging in there. Okay.
Yeah.
And class of 05, you lived in Mar, and where else?
Just Mar, and then off campus.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
They told me I was going to move to Ray as a junior, and I said, "There's no way I can do that. I have to move off campus."
Okay, we're going to move to Marie, who's going to tell us she lived in Ray for 4 years. Is that right?
Oh no, I'm a huge McVinney lover, actually. I had McVinney, and then I was actually in Bedford, and then I lived in Detrag for 2 years. So I got a nice run of apartment living while I was there. So thank you, Matt. I'm also an assistant director in alumni relations, so it's nice to meet you over Zoom. And I also just want to say I really enjoyed your article that was posted about through the New York Times. So that was a fun read. And the book that I actually just finished reading, on your scale of McVinney, I'm personally giving a 10 out of 10 for this one. This is called My Heart Will Triumph. And it's actually a book that my mom had given to me a while ago. And it's about one of the visionaries in Medjugorje, who has experienced Marian apparitions. So just a lot about her life and her experience. She grew up in what is present day Bosnia, neighboring Croatia, and how her life was impacted by the apparitions under the communist regime. So it was honestly an easy read. It was a nice one to pick up during this time. Certainly gave me a lot to think about. So if anybody needs a little spiritual uplifting, I see we have quite a few good books on here to read, but I've really enjoyed that. And I think I'll go through probably again and then highlight some of my my favorite parts of it, because I tend to do that, and I did not for this book. So, but yeah,
Very
I got to
cool.
figure out what's next.
The question is, can you spell Medjugorje?
Oh gosh, no. And actually, if ever I search it, I just pray that Google's going to auto-correct it for me.
Yeah.
It's just, I still can't get it.
Yeah.
Appreciate you putting me on the spot like that. I can try, but
Hey, don't ask me to spell it either.
yeah.
I don't know.
So
And then you have two degrees from Providence, it seems, according to you. What's the grad degree? History?
No, I wish. Actually, I do love history, but I got a degree in higher ed counseling. So I was a 2014 grad, 2016, and then I've just been hanging on ever since because I love PSA. So, yeah.
I don't blame you. Good place to be at. Well, cool. Well, nice meeting you.
Yeah, no, nice to meet you, and thank you again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So we're going to, on my screen, I'm going to look up at my wonderful Mar friends, not MEAGHER, but MAHER. I guess you guys always live in Mar Hall, right?
Actually, I lived at Aquinas, McDermott, Joe's, and then I was at where the seminary guys go. I guess there's no seminary guys. I'll think of it before. I'm going to yield to Barbara. She's the reader of the family.
Barbara,
and
what are you reading these days?
Well, I am a former English teacher, so I did all my heavy reading, classics, and I'm finished with that. So I've gotten to be much more of a fiction reader, although I am in 2 book clubs, so that gets me a little bit out of, just the fiction. But one book that I would recommend that's because I'm sort of a bestseller or contemporary fiction, is Dear Edward. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. There is, you know, in the very first chapter, you know this, probably like in the very first page, there is a plane crash and everybody in the crash perishes except this one young boy who I believe he's about 9 or 10 when the crash occurs. And it's not only his story, it's fiction of recovering, but how his survival affects all the other people. And some people start calling him Miracle Boy, and his aunt and uncle, who are his closest relatives, I believe it's his mother's sister, they adopt him, and it's his journey. And it's very interesting. It's a good read.
Wow. You know, there's a whole phenomenon around plane crashes where there's one survivor. And that
Right.
there's a whole list. If you go to Wikipedia, there's a whole list of crashes where there's only been one survivor, and there's a weird survival's guilt element to it. I mean, if you said this is fiction, it probably mirrors many cases where, you know, one person survives and they don't necessarily know why.
There's another fiction book, Before the Fall, and that there are 2 survivors. And it's a private plane, so everybody had a different reason for being there. And so it's someone who jumps on this plane at the last minute through a friend, and then the child of a couple who's on. And again, it's their story. Sounds kind of depressing, but particularly in Dear Edward, the ending is uplifting, or at least that's the way I found it.
I remembered I lived in Guzman my senior year as a prefect. In fact, I was prefect for Mccullough Wayne and Father Rob. They were in the same room by chance.
Wow.
But I'm reading a book called Say Nothing, and it's about it's sort of in the 1970s and thereafter about the conflict in Northern Ireland. And it's about an abduction of a woman, and you know, all the killings that surround it, and you know, it even goes to, I haven't gotten there yet, but it goes eventually to the peace talks, but it's all the treachery and all the agony of living in Northern Ireland on both sides, and it's not an easy read because, you know, there's a lot of innocent people who suffer just because of how they were born. And it always amazes me in Ireland about there's so much commonality in language, and that there should be no fighting. You know, it's not like you ideologically you have Russia and you know, in the United States in the Cold War situation. You have people that, you know, live across the street from you, and it's so I'm you know, I'm proud of my Irish heritage, and I try to keep up with it. So that's the book I'm reading now. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but that's what I'm reading.
Yeah, it's interesting that when I learned that all was called the Troubles, right? That's what they call it up there.
The Troubles, yeah.
And you're seeing a sort of weird reunification of Ireland now with Brexit, and figuring out maybe there will be a time when they're fully unified.
Right.
So we'll see what happens.
Yep.
And how's Kara doing, and your grandkids?
Good. Kara's a special ed teacher, and she has a little first grader, and Teddy will be 2 in May 22nd, and she's doing great, and she's, you know, it's very different. A lot of teachers are teaching their students now on the internet, but her children are, you know, have learning disabilities, so she has an extra degree of difficulty trying to, you know, and each kid is different, so she's doing her best to keep them occupied during the time that they're not physically in class.
It must be so tough. Kara, their daughter, was one of the first people I ever met at Providence College, and she's just such a wonderful person, and no surprise to learn her parents were, as the apple didn't fall far from the tree. So say hi to her for me.
I will.
Good to see you guys. You guys are in Connecticut, right?
No, Long Island.
Long Island, okay.
Close.
So Kristen, what is it that you've got going on these days? What are you reading? I don't think I can hear you.
Let's see how many people are on.
It looks like you're off mute, but your microphone doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah.
Can't hear you. Kristen, maybe try and figure out if you can figure it out. We'll move over to Jackie Gilman, friend of Kristen, friend of Matt Weber. What's going on with you? What's on your bookshelf?
Yeah, it's great to see you, Matt. I know you've come to my parish a couple of times, and we loved having you. And I saw you in the fall with Bill and Emily, so it's nice to see you again tonight. I'm reading David McCullough's The Wright Brothers. It's a great read. I had read his book on John Adams, and he had come to speak at PC twice. I remember the opening of the Ruane Center of the Humanities, and then I think it was 2 years ago at commencement he came. And I love the way he writes. And it's fascinating to watch these two young men grow up in what it seems like a very loving home. The parents, this is like the early turn of the century, and they encourage toys for exploration and learning. And the kids seem to be able to play to learn, and also they got into building and doing all kinds of things. And just to watch the path that they took, they went from bike making to a fascination with birds and trying to figure out how they could make flying machines. And I thought it was interesting that their sister Catherine was the only person who graduated from college in their family, the female at that time. It didn't seem, a typical path that they would have taken. So it's just really cool to watch them now. I'm not finished. They're in France, and France, I forget who they met, but that person was so intrigued that he invited them there, and they're doing their different experiments, and it's really about to take off worldwide. And when I think of the impact that it had so quickly after, they really got this going in terms of travel, but then for the military and so forth, it's really amazing. So it's fun. I highly recommend it. I think almost anything by David McCullough would be worth reading. And then the other one I love, this is recommended by a friend, and then I heard Father Shanley recommend it too, Help Thanks Wow by Anne Lamott. I like a lot of recovery reading, and she's hysterically funny, and she talks about different kinds of prayer, and she has all different kinds of personal anecdotes, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I'm enjoying it.
Well, I don't think I realized that the Wright brothers had a sister, and wondering if she contributed to the airplane herself. Did she have a role or what?
She didn't have a role, but they were all very close, and she was always encouraging them. She taught Latin at the local high school, but the three, Orville, thank you, Robert, and Catherine were very close. I think there were at least 5 children, and the dad was a preacher. I think he went by Bishop Wright, and yeah, I think she played a huge support to them, but I don't believe she contributed to the mechanics or to the design of the planes. But certainly that kind of relationship was important to them, and she traveled with them, and she was she did some of the flights. So yeah, she played a role.
So I guess I can blame the Wright family for my need to read Cockpit Confidential.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember when Mccullough spoke at Providence College. I wasn't there, but when I was graduating from Boston College with my graduate degree, he was the graduation speaker in 2008. 8, I think. And David Mccullough, he does this big, lofty speech. And at the end of his speech, he goes, and remember, one final point, remember, always tip the maid. And it was like, oh, okay. Like, sure, that's a good idea. But it was a very academic speech, then very practical in that last segment. Kristen, did we figure out the microphone?
Can I just ask, what was the name of the last book Jackie mentioned?
It's
Help Things Want?
Help, Thanks, Wow by
I didn't get that right.
Anne Lamott.
Thank you.
Sure.
Doesn't look like Kristen's is still working. If you figure it out, just let us know in the chat box. Stephanie, I know you're kind of organizing this, but you mentioned that you were a writer and a reader. So I'm wondering, like, what is it that you've read, and then what is it that you've written?
Sure. So I was an English major, like some of our colleagues here, and I actually am doing an MBA right now. So I don't honestly don't have a ton of time to read things that don't involve finance and, you know, corporate strategy and all that fun. But I'm actually going to be done in just over a week. So I'm looking forward to actually fully reading books instead of reading bits and pieces of different books. So I'm excited about that.
When you say you're a writer, you mean writing papers about business governance and strategy?
Yes, that. But I also, I love to write poetry. I'm just sort of reconnecting with it. I had some poetry published in middle school and high school. Not so much in college because I was kind of focusing on some different areas. But I write essays, I write articles. I'm trying to launch a blog right now. So kind of all over when it comes to the writing and the reading.
Oh, cool. Well, I really do think this is a weird gift to us all, this gift of time. And if we can take it and do something with it that doesn't involve leaving the house, like reading or writing, that could be a good thing. I think the only person I haven't heard from in terms of book reading or writing is Sarah. Sarah's like, oh, he's calling on me. Are you writing something on the history of the Board of Programmers?
No, I'm trying to help Kristen with her sound.
I would read the history of the Board of Programmers if Sarah wrote it.
It would not be that interesting, but probably some good stories for sure.
Yeah.
No, I used to be so much more of a reader in my younger years, but the type of reading I do now is definitely more lighthearted. So I'm going to take this on a totally different turn. Some of us on my team already know this, but I'm a huge fan of Mindy Kaling, who, you know, starred in the show The Office, and then she had her own show, The Mindy Project. I just find her humor to be extremely smart. I really love, you know, her in general. And she has 2 books. One is called Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me and Other Concerns? And then the other one is Why Not, it's hard to see, Why Not Me? But just easy reads. You know, if you're looking to just get a laugh, she tells some funny stories from her childhood, which are really just amusing. But one of the books that is on my list to read is, I started watching the show Little Fires Everywhere. So I'm looking to read that next. I don't know if anybody on the call has read it, but I find the show extremely intriguing. It takes place in a town in Ohio, Shaker Heights, and the author, Celeste, and her last name is just 2 letters, NG, so I don't even know how to pronounce that. But it takes place where she grew up, and it's just this story about these 2 mothers that kind of end up going kind of at odds with each other for like pretty serious reasons. And I find it really, the show's very interesting. So I'm looking forward to kind of diving into the book. Has anybody read it on the call?
I haven't read it, but I have 1 episode left of the show, which I'm watching tonight. And we're going to find out. The first scene of this show is this family's house is burnt down. And
right.
And presumably you find out in the last episode. So I'm very excited. Don't ruin it, Sarah.
No, I have not finished it. Well, I think they're just releasing it week by week. I'm all caught up, so I don't even know if we're at the end yet. But it stars Kerry Washington and Reese Witherspoon as the two mothers, and it's very good. So that's on my list to read next.
I'm reading that now as well. So.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's interesting. The book's written, looking at the characters, there's a lot of class and race elements to the relationships. And I think it's written by an Asian woman. So it's like a very fascinating take on race and class, written from totally different perspectives. So the show's great. It's on Hulu. I thought it was the last episode, but maybe if they're still releasing them, I'm not going to find out for a little bit longer.
Well, there's an element of about adoption as well, and my brother is actually adopted from South Korea. So it's an interesting watching the two perspectives, and kind of how I know it from one side of the story and how it would be coming from the other side. So it's very interesting to me. So I look forward to reading it.
Cool. Well, listen, I think we'll probably, wrap this up. I'll close out with a couple final, I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So a lot of my reading is not big fiction books that you talk about over wine, but they're, like children's books. So in case you had grandkids or nieces or nephews or folks that you wanted to read, I wanted to leave you with one recommendation and then one book that you should never read to your children. And I'm looking over at Pat. Yeah, Pat maybe cares most about this. I see his camera was turned on what looked like a giant flame torch or torch blower or something. I don't know what that is. Are you doing renovations, Pat?
We heat with wood. We live in the country, so we had snow yesterday, so we're still lighting fires. It's a quick way of getting the fires going.
Nice, and it's a beautiful tableau of your whole family on this screen. So maybe you've read this book. It's called Ida Always. I've got a 3-year-old. It's about a polar bear, and it deals with DEATH, which my 3-year-old is not really fully aware of. So having a book that talks about losing a polar bear friend is a good way to broach it when other things happen in life. So that was good. And then maybe Pat's kids like or don't like this, but this is always my least favorite request at night. Daddy, read me Peppa Pig. Okay? Not good writing. This is a show, it's a TV show that has been converted into a very, very bad, book. And there's no great message to most of the stories, and the illustrations are not great. So if you like Peppa Pig TV show, don't read the book. It's not as good as the show, which is usually the inverse. The book's better than the show. So with that all, this has been fun for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Good having this be a true international experience. Thank you, Brown family. And beautiful for me. I look at a lot of faces on this call. Rachel, I think I saw your face. I'm like, I know her from, we were on campus 3 years enough you looked familiar and to see old friends. And Brian, again, I'll never forget the time where we wore the same suit jacket, which was just such a special day. So just everyone on this call and getting to know Sarah and Stephanie through this process was great. So thank you all. Stay in touch. Let me know if there's ever any way I can help you digitally right now, or I'm at the University of Virginia. I'm still affiliated with Harvard. I go back to Providence once a year to eat at Al Forno. So let me know what I can do to help and how I can continue to give back to this school that gave so much to me. So with that, I think the book is closed.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank
and we'll be in touch. We have been exploring starting a book club on a regular basis. So if that's something that you might be interested in, definitely let us know, and you'll be hearing from us. We'll also share the recommendations that everyone gave tonight in an email afterwards. So thanks again. Thank you, Matt. I know everyone's busy, and stay safe. So thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
That was good. No?